Have you ever stopped and wondered what gives a turn its character? What makes one corner different than another? Why are some notorious and others just meh? Let's take a close look at the humble turn, that one simple trick that keeps F1 tracks from being straights that go on forever. Corners and turns may seem simple, but there are several qualities that each contribute to its personality. In this video, we'll build up the nature of a turn, bit by bit. It may seem like the main contributing property of a turn is its angle. A smaller internal angle makes for a tighter turn, right? Well, it's not quite that simple. Let's have a look at a 90-degree corner. A street circuit might feature a right-angled bend like this, or maybe like this, whereas an open racetrack might have a long 90-degree turn, like this. Now in all three corners, point A and B are in the same places, but the turns are very different. What matters here is the radius. Let's have a look at this turn, for example. These two bits are straight, so we can isolate the turn here and show that it's just part of a circle. The radius of a circle is the distance from the centre to its circumference, and the larger the circle, the longer and faster the turn is. Now, as the track has width, each turn has an outer radius and an inner radius, with the inner radius being smaller, obviously. But there's a third, more important radius, the radius of the racing line through the corner. Now, we'll cover racing lines properly in another video, but just to make sure we're all on the same page here, the racing line is the preferred fastest line through the corner. There is no one racing line, but essentially the car will turn in from the outside of the track, clip the inside of the track at a point called the apex, and then exit the turn on the outside of the track again. You'll see the racing line forms its own curve, which you can think of as part of a circle with a radius much bigger than any curve following the actual line of the track. This is much faster as larger radius curves can be taken at higher speeds, but we're not done with radiuses or radii just yet. See, this turn we've been looking at is an example of a constant radius turn. This means the radius is the same from start to finish. I can just shove one circle in here to define the corner. The infamous 130R at Suzuka used to be a single radius turn until it was modified. And 130R meant it had a radius of 130 meters, which means I could draw a circle with a radius of 130 meters and shove it up into the turn and it would fit perfectly. And as best as I could calculate, this measurement referred to the outer radius of the corner. But things get more interesting in variable radius turns. For example, you might have an increasing radius corner. This means the entry to the corner follows a small circle, but the exit traces a much larger circle arc. A good example of this is turns 12 and 13 at Shanghai. They start as a pretty tight turn, but open out into a long right-hander. On the other hand, a decreasing radius turn tightens as you travel through it. Turns 13, 14 at Sepang are an infamous example of this type of corner. If we deconstruct it, you can see decreasingly sized circle arcs make up this corner. This makes for a very challenging type of corner as you will have to enter it at a fast pace but have to brake and turn harder midway through, always trying to chase an apex that's getting away from you. A variable radius corner is more interesting as drivers don't have a simple brake, turn and hoof it tactic. They have to adjust their inputs through the turn and it's much trickier to approach perfection. Okay, so let's talk camber now. Camber refers to the tilt of the surface of the track across its width. The track may be flat, or it might be tilted one way or the other, or even bent across its width. Don't confuse this with tyre camber, by the way, which describes the angle of the wheel relative to the car. Again, we'll do that in another video. A turn can be flat, of course, but if there's tilt across the track as it goes through a corner, this can be described as on-camber or off-camber. An on-camber corner is sloped towards the inside of the corner, so if you put a ball at the outside of an on-camber turn, the ball would roll to the inside. Classically, the huge banked turns at an oval racing track are on-camber. On-camber corners make it easier to steer through the turn. It encourages your car to turn into the direction of the corner. Why? Well, let's just imagine a car on a banked turn. Here we can see the weight of the car is still acting straight down, not at 90 degrees to the track. A quick tilt shows very clearly that this force is acting a little bit in the direction of the bend. Conversely, off-camber turns slope towards the outside and encourage the car to steer away from the turning direction. This makes it harder to steer properly, producing bagloads of understeer, i.e. the car doesn't quite turn enough. You have to slow down and force the car around the turn. Turn 10 Rivage at Spa is notoriously off-camber and loaded with understeer, something Codemasters made sure to put into their F1 games, to many players' frustrated delight. And let's not forget changes in elevation, i.e. the track going up and down. An uphill entrance to a turn will shorten the braking zone, meaning you can brake even later than normal, whereas a downhill approach will force you to brake surprisingly early, as the slope encourages the car to continue forwards. Longer braking zones make for better racing, as it's easier to make mistakes, and there's a greater margin for a chasing car to brake slightly later and nip past. A corner with a dip or crest has a massive effect on grip levels through the turn. Through a dip, the car experiences increased downforce as it accelerates downwards relative to the track. Think about the heavy feeling you get when a lift reaches the ground floor. It's essentially heavier through the dip, and more downforce will mean more grip. On a crest, however, the opposite is true. The car is pulled away from the track and effectively lighter, with much less downforce. When the car goes light, it can become very twitchy. Eau Rouge at Spa has a dip and a crest, meaning the car can travel incredibly fast through the double turn, but becomes very light on exit and ready to fly off the road with the slightest error. The most interesting and challenging turns are those with elements of the unexpected. Turns with changing radiuses, elevations and widths. Turns designed to be not quite flat out, corners that imbalance the car before throwing you into the next turn. You might notice that F1's worst tracks have far fewer of these elements in them. Abu Dhabi is a prime example of a very flat track with lots of single radius corners that leave no room for flair or interpretation. So there you have it, an intro to corners. Sometime in the future we'll look at entire tracks as a whole, but for now, enjoy the corners and appreciate them when you see them being used. Thanks for watching this video. I'd be interested to know what your favourite corners are, particularly if they're on tracks we don't get to see in Formula 1, as I personally am pretty F1 focused and don't get to see the wider variety of brilliant tracks from around the world. If you enjoyed this and are new to the channel, do check out my other videos in this continuing series explaining the rules and technical aspects of Formula 1. Oh, and liking the video is a big help to me. And do subscribe so you don't miss any of my new ones. I'm expanding this channel a little bit to do some extra videos outside of this main explainer series, so I do hope you enjoy those as they're put out. And thanks to my Patreon subscribers for all their continued help. You guys are brilliant. You get these videos about half a week earlier than everyone else, so thanks for your feedback.